There is a man you have seen before, though he never tried to be seen. He does not arrive with noise. He does not announce his presence. He does not scan the room looking for approval or position himself to be validated. And yet the moment he enters, something subtle rearranges itself. Conversations lose their excess. People become slightly more measured. There is a quiet recalibration that no one can quite explain, but everyone feels. It is not dominance in the theatrical sense. It is not aggression. It is something far more unsettling than that. It is the complete absence of need, and that absence is what makes him dangerous. Most men misunderstand power from the very beginning. They believe power is something you accumulate externally. Money, status, attention, influence. They believe it is granted by others, negotiated through performance, or earned through relentless proving. So they perform, they speak too much, they give too much, they reveal too much, they chase validation as if it were oxygen, convinced that if they can just secure enough of it, they will finally feel stable. But in doing so, they commit the one error that silently disqualifies them from real power. They reveal their need. And the moment a man reveals his need, he reveals where he can be controlled. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this with a level of clarity that still makes modern advice sound naive by comparison. He did not study men at their best. He studied them at their most exposed, ambitious, desperate, strategic, afraid. He observed rulers who had everything and lost it, and others who began with nothing and rose beyond expectation. And again, he returned to the same underlying principle. The man who needs nothing cannot be manipulated. The man who needs everything can be controlled by anyone. This is not a comfortable truth, because if you look closely at your own behavior, you will begin to see how often you have traded power for approval without realizing it. You have explained yourself when silence would have been stronger. You have given more than was necessary in the hope of being valued. You have stayed longer than you should have, out of fear of losing something that was already costing you more than it gave. And each of those moments felt small in isolation, harmless, justified. But together, they form a pattern, and that pattern tells the world exactly how to handle you. Human beings are constantly reading signals, even when they are not aware of it. Every interaction is an exchange of information beneath the surface. Who needs this more? Who is more invested? Who is more willing to tolerate discomfort to keep this alive? These questions are answered not by words, but by behavior, and the answers determine everything that follows. The person who appears to need the outcome less always holds the advantage. Not because they are better, not because they are smarter, but because they are free. And freedom is the rarest currency in any interaction. Look at the man who cannot tolerate silence. The moment a conversation pauses, he rushes to fill it. Not because he has something valuable to say, but because the silence makes him uncomfortable. And in that small, almost invisible reaction, he exposes something critical. He is not in control of himself. He is governed by discomfort. And anyone who is governed by discomfort can be predicted. And anyone who can be predicted can be positioned. Contrast that with the man who lets the silence breathe, who sits in it without urgency, who allows others to reveal themselves while he reveals nothing unnecessary. There is no tension in him, no rush, no need to correct perception or secure approval in real time. And because of that, people project onto him, they try to read him, they adjust themselves around him. Without saying anything, he has shifted the dynamic entirely. This is what most people fail to understand. Power is not always exerted. Often it is simply not surrendered. The same principle governs ambition, and this is where most men sabotage themselves long before they ever get close to their goals. They speak about what they want too early. They announce their intentions before they have built the foundation to support them. They seek encouragement from people who have no investment in their success, and in doing so, they dilute their own position. Because the moment your ambition becomes visible before it is secured, it can be questioned, challenged, or quietly undermined by those who see an opportunity to gain advantage from your exposure. Machiavelli watched this play out repeatedly among the princes of his time, men of intelligence, of capability, of genuine potential, who lost everything not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked restraint. They could not hold their desire privately. They needed to be seen pursuing it. And in that need, they gave their opponents exactly what was required to stop them. The more they revealed, the easier they became to dismantle. because nothing is easier to control than a man who cannot conceal what he wants. But understand this clearly. Detachment is not the absence of desire. It is the discipline of it. It is the ability to want something deeply without allowing that want to dictate your behavior prematurely. It is governance, the governance of your impulses, your reactions, your need for immediate resolution. Most men are not defeated by external forces. They are defeated by their inability to manage themselves in the moments that matter. Consider how this plays out in relationships. The man who needs constant reassurance, who seeks validation through attention, who measures his worth by how consistently he is chosen, creates a dynamic where he must always prove himself. And the more he proves, the less he is valued. Because value is not created through abundance. It is created through selectivity, through the ability to withhold, through the presence of standards that are actually enforced. The man who needs nothing approaches differently. Not because he is indifferent, but because his identity does not depend on the outcome. He can engage fully without collapsing if it does not work. He can appreciate without clinging. He can walk away without negotiation when something violates his standard. And because of that, he is perceived differently, not as someone trying to secure a place, but as someone who chooses whether to grant access. That shift alone changes everything. The same dynamic exists in work, in leadership, in every structure where power is exchanged. The employee who visibly needs the promotion, who signals that this is his only path forward, places himself at a disadvantage before the decision is even made, because he has already revealed that he will accept less to secure it, that he has fewer alternatives, that his leverage is limited, and leverage, once exposed as weak, is rarely strengthened through effort alone. The man who needs nothing does not broadcast urgency. He does the work with precision. He maintains composure regardless of immediate outcomes. And whether or not he has options, he behaves as though he does, not as an act, but as a reflection of internal stability. And that stability creates pressure in the opposite direction. Now others begin to wonder. They begin to calculate. They begin to value what appears less available. And without demanding anything, he improves his position. This is where most people misunderstand the nature of control. They believe control is something you impose outwardly, that you dominate, persuade, or outmaneuver others through force of personality or intellect. But the most effective form of control is far quieter than that. It is the control of self. Because when you control yourself, you remove the leverage others would use against you, and when there is no leverage, there is no control to be exerted over you. History offers countless examples of men who rose not through force, but through restraint. Leaders who spoke less but carried more weight. Strategists who revealed nothing until action was irreversible. Individuals who were underestimated precisely because they did not advertise their capability, and by the time others recognized what they were dealing with, the position had already shifted. The modern world, however, conditions you in the opposite direction. It trains you to reveal constantly, to share your thoughts, your plans, your emotions, your progress. It rewards visibility over substance. It encourages immediate expression over strategic silence. And in doing so, it weakens your position before you even understand the game you are playing. Because a man who is always visible is always readable, and a man who is always readable is always controllable. This is not an argument for isolation. It is not a rejection of connection or expression. It is a call for precision, for intentionality, for understanding that not everything you feel needs to be displayed, and not everything you want needs to be announced. There is power in what you choose not to reveal. There is strength in what you allow to remain internal until it has matured into something that cannot be easily disrupted. The discipline required for this is not glamorous. It does not produce immediate validation. In fact, it often feels uncomfortable, especially in the beginning. You will feel the urge to explain, to clarify, to secure understanding in real time. And resisting that urge will feel unnatural, because you have been conditioned to equate expression with strength. But over time, something begins to shift. You become less reactive, less dependent on immediate outcomes, more anchored in your own judgment. And with that shift comes a different kind of presence, one that does not need to be asserted, one that is felt rather than performed. People begin to respond to you differently, though they may not be able to articulate why. They listen more carefully when you speak. They take your decisions more seriously. They hesitate before attempting to pressure you, because they cannot easily identify where your pressure points are. And all of that emerges not from what you have gained externally, but from what you have eliminated internally. Need is the most expensive thing you can carry because it costs you before any negotiation has even begun. It shapes your behavior in ways that betray your position. It creates urgency where patience would be more effective. It leads you to accept terms that do not serve you, simply to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty. And most dangerously, it convinces you that you are acting rationally when in reality, you are reacting emotionally. To become the man who needs nothing is not to become empty. It is to become full enough that you are not dependent on external conditions to maintain your sense of self. It is to build a foundation that does not collapse when something is removed. A foundation based on values, on discipline, on clarity of direction, so that whether something is given or taken, you remain intact. This is the quiet power Machiavelli observed, not loud, not dramatic, not performative, but decisive. The kind of power that does not need to prove itself because it is not in question. The kind of power that does not chase because it has already established its position. And the kind of power that cannot be easily dismantled because it does not rely on unstable variables. You will not arrive at this state overnight. It is built through small decisions, repeated consistently. Choosing not to respond immediately, choosing not to explain unnecessarily, choosing not to pursue what does not align, even when the temptation is strong. Each of these choices reinforces a different identity, one that is governed internally, rather than externally. And over time, that identity becomes undeniable, not because you have declared it, but because your behavior reflects it without contradiction. You become harder to influence, harder to pressure, harder to manipulate. Not because you resist forcefully, but because there is nothing in you that can be easily pulled. That is what makes the man who needs nothing dangerous, not in the sense of harm, but in the sense of independence. He cannot be bought with approval. He cannot be guided by fear of loss. He cannot be rushed into decisions that do not serve him. And in a world that depends heavily on those very levers to function, such a man stands apart. The question then is not whether this is possible. It is whether you are willing to endure the process required to become it, because it will ask you to confront your habits, to question the ways in which you have sought validation, to recognize where you have been operating from need rather than choice, and to change those patterns deliberately, even when it feels uncomfortable. But if you do, something shifts that cannot be undone. You stop negotiating from weakness. You stop performing for acceptance. You stop explaining your value to those who are not in a position to grant it. And instead you begin to operate from a place of quiet certainty, where your actions are aligned with your standards, and your standards are not compromised by temporary pressure. And in that state you will notice something that most people never experience. The world begins to respond differently. Opportunities approach without being chased. Respect is given without being demanded, and influence grows without being forced. Not because the world has changed, but because you have removed the very signals that once made you easy to control. This is the paradox Machiavelli understood. The less you appear to need, the more the world offers. Not out of generosity, but out of recognition. Recognition of stability, of control, of something that cannot be easily moved. And in a world where most people are constantly reaching, reacting, and revealing, that stillness becomes undeniable. Become that stillness. And if you've made it this far, then something in you already recognizes the truth of this, even if part of you resists it.